Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. Hollywood action without John Wayne movies could have been unmemorable. But John Wayne wasn't just a cowboy and action hero with a powerful moral compass. He represented traditional values, patriotism, and so patriotic that Stalin issued an order for a move on him. Yet beneath this facade, Wayne struggled with inner demons and private remorse. Dispute for years, could that be the cause of the FBI arrived at his home in Newport. What did they discover after he passed away, concealed behind those gleaming walls? And will it permanently alter your perception of him? This is the startling reality behind America's most adored figure. Those who are aware, many referred to John Wayne as the Duke. He would concur that there is one thing John Wayne, who passed away before him, was a man who believed that he was unbeatable. Perhaps he did this, surviving a few situations that ought to have killed him but chose not to. Thus, he developed a tendency to be stubborn. And when we say obstinate, and trust us when we say you John Wayne, you don't know the whole truth. Enjoyed drinking, but he never thought he consumed too much alcohol in spite of He wed women in each of his. Every marriage says the same thing. Even his co-workers were aware that he was. And however, they were afraid to tell his. Wayne enjoyed his job, but this meant that, following the completion of his scenes he would be so inebriated in the morning that he would be infuriating to collaborate with in the afternoon. As if the excessive alcohol consumption was insufficient, John enjoyed smoking and had possessed a smoking policy that would render a chimney appear inefficient. He would consume 1 pack of cigarettes each day, and a cruel party boy was with him. Lifestyle trend in him as well. Ultimately, the cigarettes, alcohol content returned to come back to bother him in 1964 when he was still thriving in his profession since his breakthrough in the movie stage, 1939. Coach Wayne was diagnosed with lung. The news about cancer was heartbreaking. But what? The fact that the physicians made things worse, found out about the cancer too late. The solution is already nearing completion. Wayne had a straightforward task to complete. 4 of his ribs were removed during surgery, and his whole left lung, and the procedure was dangerous, but Wayne didn't care about the hazards. What did the man want the physicians to do was required, which they accomplished 10 days later. Wayne was informed that he was cancer-free, then rejoiced in his newfound vitality by keeping up the drinking and smoking notwithstanding. This time, he began smoking expensive cigars. After that, he poured himself into his job and created before cancer. A number of popular films shit him once more, this time with cancer of the stomach. The days of heavy drinking had ultimately caused harm, and Wayne passed away with stomach cancer in 1979. Aside from the fact that even when the John Wayne continued to be followed by action. On this occasion, his relatives were the action's stars, but not in the way. Some of them, they believed, were for the unexpected moment in their lives when the FBI discovered his old mansion after storming it. In light of that, John provided an $6.85 million estate. The funds were a lot, but this shocked a lot of people who thought that given John's work style since he was first cast in the lead, and he ought to watch the 1930 film, The Betrayal, be more valuable, but his son-in-law Donald LaClava was aware of why Jay's wealth had greatly decreased, and we'll get to the rationale in Jay's will shortly, which had $5.75 and had read up to 27 pages, million in private assets, and $100,000 in revenue from his investments. Wayne got divorced after 3 marriages. Josephine was his first wife twice. Alicia Sance, the mother of 4, for him, his second child, was the dramatic and fiery Esperanza Bauer, who almost killed the Duke's head, and the gentle Parolette, who endured with him children for John Wayne. His first wife placed a portion of his property in trust and directed the aforementioned trust to pay $3,000 a month to Josephine, and when she left the whole of that estate to her, held in trust, need to be split by he had 4 children with her, excluding additionally. This Duke ensured that her kids would receive $5,000 times how much their ages differ from 21. Thus, Michael, his firstborn kid, who was 44 at the moment the will was being prepared. Reed got Michael also received Jay's shares, totaling $115,000 Batjack, Jay's producing firm. Additionally, Productions Incorporated, maybe because he has served as a high-ranking officer in for many years. Aside from this, Botjack, the third administrator identified, is Michael. Was he the owner of the estate, favorite, and Par's 3 kids received the identical $5,000 times the age gap between them and 21. But he gave her nothing in return. His will, which raised inquiries with people that want to know why Pa didn't receive. Regardless, she was the final woman he married, and she also had hardships. Due to her involvement in Duke's life, she encountered Duke during one of the most difficult phases of his life following his second marriage. Esperanza almost lost his head. Due to her suspicion that he had relationships with his co-stars, they went to the divorce court. And in contrast to his first wife, Josephine was a private person. Esperanza, during her separation from him, didn't she feel denigrated and let loose? Blind rage against the man she used to love. She discussed Duke's personal matters publicly and referred to him as cruel. In order to protect himself, John Wayne had retaliated against Esperanza for calling her. John had to cope with being a drinker. Public display. And when he was given the chance to work, which allowed him to, Wayne leaped straight at it in Peru. Intended to be searching for places. They chose to use them as sets. Examine only local sets, that the setite didn't attract his attention. But Pa Hu was wearing a low cut in a moment, wearing a costume and doing a sensual dance. Duke gave his introduction, and the two started a partnership that evolved into union on the day Duke completed his separation from Esperanza. Regretfully, Pella had a different perspective on life with Duke. He was constantly occupied and never had too much time for her, and it quickly turned into, for the lady who abandoned her, loneliness culture and homeland, for a location that stayed peculiar to her for a long time. Occasionally, he also demanded that she accompanied him on the trip, and this didn't assist Pilar's predicament and her anxiety. She was unable to sleep due to nervousness, and that the smallest sound caused her to jump in fear. She eventually came up with a fix for herself and started using sedatives. Although it was a poor move, she really thought that was the only way she could make. But it reached a stage when she cut her because she could take it no more. Own wrists in the hopes of dying, although she didn't. She was discovered by crew members, but instead of Duke will pursue them and take her right to the. He remained at the hospital to work and employed nurses to accompany her. Then, as though that encounter wasn't already horrifying enough, Pa endured it when Duke continued to cheat on her. Superior to the other wives' performance, but even she had boundaries and distanced herself from but did not file for divorce after. During their split, Duke spent time with Pat Stacy, his former assistant, and even included her in his will, and gave her. Additionally, he gifted his first secretary $30,000. Why didn't Pa receive anything for $10,000, even if he was removed against his will? Pa continued to be one of Duke's largest supporters. She chronicled him in her memoir, stating was 80% a decent man, but individuals and the media sought to highlight the 20% that he didn't possess, but she admitted to being the wife of the Duke and he wanted his family. Therefore, he was tough to accompany him on his travels when he traveled, which caused instability, but in contrast to what she subsequently disclosed that appeared tolerable. According to Pa, she received pregnant during the time of Duke's divorce, due to Esperanza. Duke was unwilling to cause yet another controversy, and he informed Pa that he was safeguarding his image in order to terminate the pregnancy that she. Did you find it odd that Pa was removed from the will? Is there a chance that hidden cause of this, or did Duke provide for her in a different manner? Not the only thing that would be excluded from the will. Consider the flaming Esperanza as well received nothing following the divorce. From Duke, Esperanza began to decline and started consuming more alcohol than normal. When she locked herself when she was 40 years old at her hotel room in Mexico and drank, killing herself. Would she have received anything? Perhaps Donald, if she were still living. Lava survived, but he didn't receive anything. That Duke directly directed, that Lava and even Lava be left out, did not protest. This was the cost he's suffering because he betrayed Duke. But he refused Toby the first one to turn on you. Duke's actions. Recall how John Wayne enjoyed deceiving one of the many. Marlene was one of the ladies he had an affair with. Dietrich. She was a woman who could not be stopped. Additionally, the instant she saw Wayne on their movie 7 set, she took in all of his 6.4 sinners, magnificently shaped body and resolute, that she would have him in one way or another. The Duke didn't require much. He was convinced or, perhaps seduced. Straight into her trousers, and the two hit a more passionate partnership. Compared to his first wife's marriage. At Josephine's time during this romance with Dietrich, his connection to Josephine endured pain while living alone at home, awaiting Duke's arrival so he can consume the food that she prepared for Duke on the. However, he was living the party boy's lifestyle, getting wasted and discovering who he is. He trusted her and was hip deep in Dietrich. As his fortune increased, he requested from her suggestions on how to handle it. He wasn't the most cautious individual and really required a manager for his funds. Dietrich, who appointed Beau Ruse to oversee her millions, requested that Duke follow suit. Beau was a well-liked person in Hollywood, handled Joan Crawford's finances and the Sisters of Andrews, therefore he had ancestry. He also has a wonderful character and extravagant, a way of living which, rather than forcing his clients to, his suspicions calmed them down, were positive that he was competent. He and Duke grew to be very close. Duke was certain he would have further millions. But then things became strange. One of the many investments Beau made for him got bounce checks in succession, and notices of foreclosure were strange. And Wayne, whose lack of subtlety is well known, gave Beau a fragment of his thoughts, and Beau pledged to do better, but he was aware of one thing regarding he used that against the Duke Wayne. Beau kept making errors. $700,000 of Wayne's funds were invested. Wayne lost Panama, thus he entered $1 million more, which was also a flop. Although John Wayne was unaware of it, he was broke, only to discover that he didn't have any cash when he and his spouse, Pa, traveled to dine in New York at Saks on 5th Avenue and accrued a $3,500 charge. He instructed the cashier to they charge Beau the sum, but Beau didn't pay, and after 63 months, Wayne received anlet notification from the eatery Heskett Beau to pay over the phone. But Beau, didn't you realize that Duke was now furious? He's not the kind of person who gets upset easily. Mary St. John, his secretary, was dispatched to Beau. Attempted to persuade her to return, but Mary was unyielding and maintained that desired to view the file of her supervisor, and when Mary saw the portfolio, she was startled to discover that nearly nothing remained in Wayne's testimonies. She informed Wayne, and Wayne himself took action, asking Beau what was happening, and Beau told Duke. Duke didn't have much money left, asked for the precise sum, and Beau replied. Duke gave him the time he needed to compute it. Beau was merely taking his time, and a few weeks later, he demonstrated to Duke. What he Duke? It was a pile of nothing, was impoverished and furious, yet he shared Beau was aware that Duke wasn't partially to fault. The type that was interested in seeing how his account records to monitor his finances thus. He took advantage of Duke's desire to litigate. But there would be an issue if he did that. Indicated that he would launch his company in the public while demonstrating that he wasn't clever for not checking his finances. Beau had nothing and was also broke. Duke was the one Beau could get from him, distraught, but he wasn't the type to Duke got himself up and gave up, worked himself to death because of this. Duke worked and took many flicks. Quite difficult, regrettably not being, did not improve his connection with Pa, his wife, whom he finally divorced. If he gave Pilar nothing, according to allegations in his will, he have a contract with her for separation and made provisions for her in that contract. Didn't have a similar contract with Lava, his son-in-law, following that disaster. Duke got his money back with Beau, but required someone he could rely on to oversee his riches. So he got in touch with his son-in-law Lava and assigned him the responsibility of overseeing his investments and accounts. Generally speaking, Whatever lava halava should not have lost money. That, and he lacked the manners to inform Duke until 1965, at which point Duke took a trip to Dallas and spent $30,000 in lava, was upset when the bill arrived. Duke didn't have that much, they said. Duke stared at him, and he had money to spend. He only told Lava, maybe shocked or irritated. There must be funds in the bank. There wasn't any money to pay these bills. Lava had made a dry oil investment in substandard real estate. Wells and Moore Duke had lost money once more. Thus, he immediately dismissed Lava and took away him from the will in the absence of these financial calamities. How much? What John Wayne's estate would have contained? Duke might have something that we don't know. Earned, if his possessions weren't in poor condition, successfully. But we are certain of the other items discovered in his residence by the FBI, and many have been astonished by this one. Nobody could guess what it was at the time of John Wayne's. When he was younger, he had always envisioned serve in the military. Thus he made the decision to join the United States Naval Academy, but was rejected because of subpar grades. But there was still that desire to serve. Thus, America's entry into World War II, Wayne wanted to serve, but he was initially excused because of his age, and in spite of this, Duke deferred enlistment. He wrote to John Ford, refusing to give up, that he was interested in joining and even inquired if he were able to join Ford's military unit. Therefore, upon his reclassification as Wayne, who was eligible for the draft, was thrilled. Regretfully, the studio where he was employed, Republic Studios, had different ideas, wanted to keep him around since he was the sole A-list celebrity with a contract. Wayne threatened to leave with them. From Herbert J. Yates and his contract, Wayne was threatened by the President of the Republic. Wayne got entangled and lost with a lawsuit. Out on duty, he felt bad about it. However, he had a plan that he applied to Strategic Services Office, which would eventually join the CIA. He desired to be among their spies, but they turned them down. Nevertheless, they weren't tossed-up with him once he received the rejection. Wayne started touring the US from the OSS South Pacific hospitals and bases, realizing that doing so provided him with the Wayne was the ideal cover that the OSS hired, and assigned him a covert task. They inquired him to examine General Douglas, commander of the Southwest, MacArthur Pacific area, his employees, and check to see if they were blocking the OSS. Wayne performed his duties effectively. Consequently, an OSS certificate of service, yet in spite of this tiny bit, Duke never really forgave the action. He bore the shame of his own actions, failed to serve his nation when it was needed. Him most. Thus he made an effort to find what he thought was atonement by ensuring that he produced movies that backed the US activities after it had turned into the common practice of doing the opposite. Additionally, when the US government started to look for performers with communist Duke, an actor spearheaded the campaign against them and declined to collaborate with anybody he thought to be connected to communism. He became unpopular with his peers as a result. Stalin even detested him for it, that he gave the order to kill Duke. But the Duke was indifferent. He lived for only his family and himself.